Thank you again. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kayleen Harrington, and I say recently, I don't know how long you can keep it going for, but I joined the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce in June remotely, and I look after their full events programme. So as you can imagine, the events programme went out the window and we started again with our virtual offering. So thank you for joining us, and I really hope you're enjoying our recovery programme event, which has been designed to support businesses to restart, rebuild and renew. So with only a few weeks left until the end of the transition period, companies need to be advanced in their readiness for new border controls, custom arrangements and supply chain processes. In the 60-minute Ask the Expert event, British Chambers custom expert Liam Smith will provide an overview of the new border controls, the impact on trade flows, as well as an update on the trade agreements that will be in place after the 31st of December. Following the presentation, there'll be a live Q&A where Liam will answer your questions. So please use the Q&A function when you have a question. I've just got to do some background admin stuff, so I'm going to turn my video off, but I will be back in time for the Q&A. So, Liam, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kayleen, and for the introduction as well. And just to reinforce the chat function, if you can use that for any questions that come up during the presentation, I'd appreciate that, and I'll do my best to come to those questions as we work through as I work through this content, and also at the end if needs be. But very open to trying to answer as many questions as I can today for you. So where we are is we've got 29 days to go until the 31st of December. After which, of course, the United Kingdom will be operating outside of the single market. Of course, we have already left the European Union. That was back in January this year, and we're in this period of transition. And what I'll try and cover today is I'll try and give you a view on where. I'll also touch on some very practical information where you can find information that may help you to trade in future, and point to some of the government advice that is already in existence. I'll also look at the gaps. Where do we still have an absence of information that may be stopping you getting prepared? And then I'll finish off with some practical questions that you ought to ask yourself in business, and we offer you 2020 vision opportunity to really examine where you are as a business and how prepared that you are, and whether you're covering most of the kind of basic or key things that you ought to be doing, in my humble view and in my experience. So where we're at the moment is we're in this final countdown phase. The issues at stake are definitely seem still to be around fish, and in Norfolk you're of course near the coast, and or you're on the coast rather, but certainly in your region there'll be people who are concerned about our fishing waters and the control of our fishing waters, and that still is a subject that is causing difficulties between the negotiating teams. The UK wants to have full sovereign control, but of course ironically much of our fishing quota, or certainly a substantial proportion of our fishing quota, is owned by foreign companies, not UK companies. But nonetheless, there's a lot of work that has gone into trying to find a compromise on fish. And it sounds like from the weekend that the EU side and the UK side are working towards some kind of compromise in that area. Big subject matter, Northern Ireland Protocol, because of course the Good Friday Agreement took many years to reach on all sides, and no one wants to compromise peace in Northern Ireland. So the protocol was put in place to offer some of those protections, and the UK Internal Market Bill appeared to the other side in the EU, compromised some of the principles behind the Northern Ireland Protocol. And that was the big feature last month, and what was causing our talks with the EU to break down. That I'm putting in light grey now, because it seems that people have got off of that subject, are very focused on the key issues of state aid, fisheries, and the level playing field, of course, and the peace in Northern Ireland. And so that's where the subjects, those are the subjects that the negotiating teams are trying to resolve. Most other matters relating to an agreement with the European Union appear to be have been resolved, and there is tacit agreement on issues such as rules of origin, accumulation of origin, the way trade happens, issues of security, and the like appear to be resolved. It's these key matters or prevailing matters that are stopping a deal being done. But we probably shouldn't be surprised at that, as these arrangements often go to the wire. Behaviours I've been monitoring for the last year and a half, and pretty much every presentation I've ever made has had reference to these behaviours in it. I've said to people, beware of the language, watch the language. The language is the clue as to where we're at in this negotiation. And early on, of course, the language was fairly aggressive, fairly confrontational, but now it's less confrontational, it's less aggressive, and it's more about finding language that is aligned with the other side. So in the last week, the output from David Frost has been very aligned with the output of Michel Barnier. And so they're saying the same things, and both saying that the other side needs to achieve this new thing, which is compromise on fisheries, compromise on state aid, and ensuring that the EU keeps a level playing field. Pretty much that's what they say. We've had lots of deadlines, as you will know. We've had the day one no deal threat, and that we were reaching that day one no deal in the UK because we're going to go off the cliff edge. On 2 occasions, neither of those things happened. And finally, we had this transitional arrangement that was put into place. Again, all of the transitional agreement was agreed right in on the 11th hour. We should recall that that's the case. Now we only have one deadline. The deadline's 31 December, and therefore there's no more false dawns. We're done with false dawns. It's make or break time. Also, pace and frequency has been, low pace, low frequency, followed by, actually, you may remember that period where David Frost said there's no point in going back, we've got nothing to discuss. That we then invited the EU back, and they had something to discuss. Now we've got, in the last 3 weeks, high frequency of meetings, almost continuous. They're in the tunnel. Important to note also that we don't get notice of what the meeting discussions are going to be around. We only really get one message of output at the end. And those messages are talking about the other side needing to compromise. And compromise, indeed, I think, is what we will get, and does seem like it's imminent. So we had the politics of the situation. We had politics instilled with fear and lots of rhetoric. They seem now to be in the background, and we're moving towards pragmatism on both sides. And if they can reach an agreement, which would be good for both sides, I'm quite sure, then I think we'll move to both sides claiming victory. And that's okay in these circumstances. Both sides need to be able to claim victory for the respective audiences. So that's an overview of where we're at. I already said this will be last minute. Don't expect necessarily that we'll have agreement on a deal on the 25th of December or beforehand. I think it may be more likely the 30th or 31st. And I understand that the EU member state leaders are asked to be at a meeting on the 28th of December. They never meet between Christmas and New Year, but there is a meeting being scheduled and planned in order that those leaders can consider the terms of an agreement, should an agreement be reached in principle by that time. So that's where we're at the moment. That's the negotiation. Moving on to state of readiness in March and then 2020. They've subsequently reported again in October on the state of play with our border readiness. In March, they said that 8 out of 9 key elements of government and border industry readiness that they were monitoring was at significant risk of not being delivered by the 1st of January 2021. That was in March. In September, when they looked again and asked the Border Protocol Delivery Group where they were at, they concluded that those 8 out of 9 was still the same state of play. As recently as yesterday, Alex Chisholm, Permanent Secretary, also talked about the state of readiness of those systems, but said, in diverting the question, that he was more concerned about the readiness of businesses. Rather ironic in that businesses can only be ready when government systems are ready. However, that we are where we are. The reason for their concern is this huge leap from 55 million customs declarations made currently, excuse me, to some 270 million estimated to be needed that we'll need to make as traders after we leave the single market. And that lift is purely related to trade flows between the UK and the EU. Also, they are concerned that it's estimated that between 40 and 70%, it's quite a high margin of error there, but between 40 and 70% of trucks will not be border ready when they head towards the border, head towards the EU. And that's worrying because that would have the potential then to cause blockades. And the 1.41 billion is the amount of money government will have spent. And the NEO would say that they didn't start spending it quick enough, despite the fact that it's a very significant number. So you ought to be concerned about the border, and really why I'm telling you that, I'm telling you and I'm suggesting that you look at where your trade flows run through and have a plan B, so that if we find that Folkestone, which is having trouble right now actually getting goods in, and Dover become gridlocked, then have you got an alternative strategy for either moving your goods out of the UK or bringing your goods into the UK? Knowledge is power. Of course, it always is. I want to point you now in the direction of this government content in gov.uk, and to save you the trouble of trying to navigate and search in the gov.uk search bar and not getting the answer you want, I've hyperlinked all of these headings. But these are quite important in terms of managing cash flow, particularly against the backdrop of COVID and businesses having already being cash strapped, very many of them, and particularly where we've seen trade flows slow down. That may mean that cash is king, it always is, but in particular at this time where we're facing the addition of VAT at the border for imports from the EU and duty paid for goods coming in from the EU where they've been duty free in the past as we've been part of the single market. So first thing to talk about is postponed VAT accounting. This is a mechanism whereby you can account for import VAT in your normal VAT return, whatever frequency that is for your company, and pay that VAT as it becomes due, rather than the alternative, which is that you pay the VAT to Hmrc as the goods cross into the UK and are cleared at the port. So the announcement for that was made actually back in November 2019 as part of the then Chancellor's budget. We lobbied for postponed VAT accounting to be reintroduced at the point that we left the single market, and succeeded in getting that. So that mechanism is there. It's not complicated for people who are used to doing VAT returns to put in place, but you do need to make some systematic and administrative controls for your company in order that if Hmrc turn up and audit you, they know that you are compliant with what they expect you to do. So there's a link there to what to do and how to do it. Second thing is duty deferment and guarantee waivers. We asked for guarantee-free duty deferment accounts. The government has come up, and Hmrc have come up with a solution that really is a good solution, better than we could have asked. It's better than we could have asked because if you're awarded a guarantee waiver, then you can apply for that right now. It went live on the 27th of November. If you apply for a guarantee waiver, you're automatically awarded up to £10,000 of waiver per month. So most SMEs would find that a very substantial amount for the amount of duty they would pay. And remember, that only relates to the duty, not the VAT element of any importations that you might make. But nonetheless, you have that waiver, which means that you can clear the goods at the border and pay the duty on the 15th of the month following the date of import. That assumes that you don't use something I'll come on to in the next slide, which is you don't delay the point at which you make full declarations using the stage progression towards full decks. But nonetheless, apply for a guarantee waiver if there's any chance that you're going to pay duty on any of the goods that you bring into the UK. It will help your cash flow, and the application process has been simplified and is not difficult to do. Third thing is tariffs and where to find them. This has been a point of consternation for me because the government did not have the tariffs fully published. They do now have the tariffs published and online, and you can look up. This is obviously WTO terms, assuming that we don't have a deal with the EU, but it does allow you to be forewarned of what would be your worst case scenario in terms of tariffs from the 1st of January. And that link will take you to a lookup table where you put in basically the commodity code, and then it will give you the tariffs for every country where tariffs apply under WTO terms. That would only be replaced by an agreement with the EU, which would zero most of those tariffs from where they currently stand. And you may also find that the tariff for your goods is zero in any case. Number 4 is the thing that we probably get asked about, well, regularly, probably not one of the top 4, but regularly asked and very critical for businesses, and that is Incoterms and how to apply them. You know, Incoterms are the trading terms that you agree with the other party, either the people you're buying from or you're selling to. And the most common of those the Incoterms that we see used is either something called Ex Works, I'm sure you're familiar with that, or Deliver Duty Paid, DDP. And both of those terms are really commonly used because they disproportionately favour one side of the transaction. Deliver Duty Paid disproportionately favours the buyer of the goods, and Ex Works disproportionately favours the seller of the goods. There are actually 11 Incoterms, and I'll come to them just in a second. After I point out the hyperlink at the bottom here, all Hmrc documents. Helpfully in the last few days, Hmrc have collated all of the publications into one web address. It's behind that link there, and they're sorted by date order. So the more recent are on page 1, the oldest are on page 24. So on the one hand, they're all there and they're in date order. On the other hand, if you're looking for something, there's 24 pages of about 20 documents to go through. If it's not on the first page in recent, I'd suggest a Google search to get to where they are on gov.uk. So turning to Incoterms, there are 11 Incoterms available and recognised internationally. Those that are for any mode of transport, and those mostly most common terms used are those 2 that I've mentioned. There are another 9 to pick from, and again I'd encourage you to look at what terms you're trading with your supplier or buyer, and look to see if perhaps there's an Incoterm that in the context of the EU provides a better balance of responsibilities between the 2 parties in order that you maintain that relationship. So for example, FCA, which is Free Carrier Aboard, basically there with FCA, a very basic level, the title of the goods transfers during the movement of the goods between buyer and seller, and it moves at an agreed point, typically at the border. While it's rather on the ship, after it's left one border and before it arrives at another. And that can often be helpful because the party that is selling the goods then takes care of customs formalities in the country of exit, and the party buying the goods takes care of the formalities in the country of entry. And typically both those parties reside and have trading establishments in those locations. So Incoterms, in contract terms, it's worth looking at where you are right now, what your contract terms are with your buyers, your sellers and buyers and so on, and seeing if you need to make any adjustment. I want to move on to the simplified or staged import procedures for EU imports that will become live on the 1st of January. And this is HMRC's way of giving traders more time, if you like, to prepare for goods that are being brought in from the EU, particularly those goods that are being brought in, some of which will be reprocessed into finished goods that will then be for re-export. And so there is this guidance on the staged introduction for EU imports, and it does only apply to EU imports. And basically there are two stages to the staged introduction. Stage one is that you keep records of those goods that you import, and these are for standard goods only. So if your goods are excise or control goods, then you can't use this mechanism. You need to do full declarations. But if you can use this mechanism, it allows you to make an entry in your records, and then subsequently, within 175 days of those goods arriving in the UK, you make a supplementary declaration. And the reason I say it's never simple is because actually you have two processes here instead of one with a full declaration. And so it may be advantageous to use staged procedures, but they won't be simple. They won't be simplified, and you must keep very specific records in this under EIDR, under the Entry in Declarant Records procedure. And actually, I helpfully give you the information that you need to retain. There's 7 core elements, and there are another 5 potential elements if your goods are moving into a customs warehouse or for temporary admission, or some other factors there that you need to record in certain circumstances. But you do need to understand this. Particularly, I'd point to a couple of things. One is the customs procedure code that you're bringing the goods under. The commodity code of your goods you need to be absolutely sure of and have hyperlinked locations where you can find information. And really important thing is the customs value. The customs value is the basis on which duty and VAT is calculated by HMRC in their system. And so it's imperative for you to be compliant. You must ensure that you record the correct customs valuation, which will not only be the invoice value of the goods, but will also be other factors such as any insurance that's been paid, the cost of transport, and some other fees that may apply to the goods that you bring in. So it's important you understand the difference between customs valuation and the value of the goods on an invoice. Moving now to the things that we don't know. Clearly, we don't know the terms of a UK-EU agreement. That is yet to be revealed. We can guess at the terms of a likely agreement, but we don't truly know the detail of that. And so in the absence of that, then there are a whole range of things that we can only estimate and can only at this moment work on the basis of WTO terms. For example, will we have convergence or divergence on standards and regulations? So will the markings that you make and the approvals you have with EC approvals, for example, are the standards you're working to there going to be the same as the UK standard, or is there going to be divergence? Will UK standards be recognised by the EU, and will there be reciprocity there? And so that's really an important thing for anyone that's exporting or importing goods. Rules of origin. We don't know the rules of origin that will be the basis of an EU deal. We can guess at them. We can guess and hope that accumulation of origin will apply so that parts that come from the EU can be incorporated into finished goods in the UK and treated as if they have UK origin. Quite an important element if you're a manufacturer. And then there's the continuity deals that are still to be done with countries such as Mexico, Turkey, Egypt, to name but 3. There aren't many still to be done, but there's some fairly big ones that are still outstanding. And they're outstanding because some countries will not reach a continuity agreement with the UK bilaterally until we have settled our position with the European Union, because they in turn are worried about their relationship with the European Union being compromised by us by striking out on a deal with the UK. And then there's the evolving position in trade between GB into Northern Ireland and back to GB or in either direction. We have some instructions about the systems that will operate there, but some of those systems, like the new CDS customs system, is going to be deployed on the GBNI trade for the first time ever. And as it's been slow in its development and slow in its delivery, there are significant concerns amongst intermediaries, haulage companies and ports that CDS may not be ready on time for 1st of January, because CDS is the only system we can use in Northern Ireland, as the customs system has to be UCC, Union Customs Code compliant, and our chief system isn't. Therefore, the EU has accepted the terms of the arrangement between NI and ROI on the basis that we use a UCC compliant system, and that's CDS. There's also a new goods vehicle movement system, GVMS, that is still under development and has not yet been fully delivered to hauliers who will have to use it. And in order that they use that system, when hauliers use that system, if you export goods and you ask them to come and pick goods up from you, they are unlikely to pick the goods up unless you have an export entry already accepted by Chief, if goods are going to the EU, or by CDS if you're making an export entry into Northern Ireland, because without the movement reference number, they cannot be GVMS compliant, so they need that. Likewise, for a new system that is called Get an HGV Ready, it was referred previously to being Smart Freight. Anyway, that changed. It's now called Get an HGV Ready. And that system, again, is under development and not yet delivered, yet to be delivered. So those are the things that we absolutely don't know at the moment. Turning now to the things that traders don't appear to know but should know. Certainly some of it, these are the four most popular things that we get asked to help traders with. One is customs procedures. Very often, they're customs procedures that already have been published in the border operating model and are known, and guidance is available online from Hmrc on those procedures. There are a few occasions where they relate to matters with regard to moving between GB and or UK and EU, where matters are not fully known yet. But I would say the old Pareto, 80% of the time, it's information that's there already. So if you're stuck on something, Google it first and try and get advice before you call on Hmrc to answer a question they may already have answered. That said, there is a forum that you can go onto in Hmrc where you can pose questions and someone will come back and answer your question without the need to phone up and so on. That's already live and you can use that. The other thing we get asked most about is Aori numbers. It used to be UK Aori numbers. Now the questions on Aori are about, will I need an Aori number in the EU? And if I do, how do I get one? Will I need an Aori number in Northern Ireland that's different to my GB one, an XI Aori? And if I do, how do I get one? Actually, the answers to both of those questions are really easy. If you're delivering duty paid to anywhere in the EU, you will need an EU Aori number if you are going to file the import declaration at the other side. And you get that by applying to the customs authority in the country in which you're going to make that thing happen. And that being the case, you may also need to set up an establishment in that country. It can be a non-trading establishment, but nonetheless, you will need to have some kind of establishment in that country where you're going to make customs imports and clearances in order that you can deal with any VAT, any duty, and so on in relation to that. Google it first before calling Hmrc, says Tom Hillier. A daft statement. It's not really. The reason I say Google it first is because Google's search engine will find Hmrc documents much faster than using the search engine that Hmrc have. It may be an indictment on Hmrc that their search engine doesn't work, but it's just my experience, and I'm trying to save you some time, Tom. Go straight to, go into Google, search for the terms and put Hmrc in the end of it, and it's more likely to find you the page you're looking for on gov.uk than gov.uk is. And I've told gov.uk people that too, incidentally. They acknowledge their search engine is not brilliant. So that's on Aoris. On VAT, again, in relation to VAT that is in other countries and the reclaiming of VAT, we get lots of questions in relation to VAT. Of course, there is postponed VAT accounting, but there's also the VAT that you may pay in other EU countries, and the need you'll have to try and reclaim that VAT in some way, either either through having a trading establishment in that country or by other means of reclaim. You need a VAT specialist for that, but we get asked lots of questions on VAT. And then tariffs and duties, and I've given you a clue as to where you can look up those numbers for you, you can search the worst case scenario if we end up in WTO terms, in order that you're forewarned about that. So that's where we're at in terms of the things that we get asked most about, and very often people could help themselves. If you come to us, we'll maybe just signpost you to where you can get the information, but we'll do the best we can for you. And just on those trade agreements, I'd just like to highlight the value of the trade agreements done already. So there are 50 countries where the UK has reached either an agreement or have agreed the terms of an agreement yet to be ratified. But almost without exception, in fact, without exception, those countries have agreed terms that mean that they'll allow traders to operate in those terms from the 1st of January, even if our Parliament has yet to ratify that agreement. So we'll act as if the agreement has been made. There are 14 countries worth about £35 billion of UK exports where we have yet to reach agreements. And a lot of those countries actually not only have high focus on exports, but actually if you take a country like Ghana, we import more than we export in terms of volume from Ghana, lots of consumer products like fruit and vegetables and the like. So there'll be an impact from that as well, as the imports as well as from the exports. But the EU 27 countries are the lion's share of the trade that we do as the UK. 43% of UK exports go to those countries, worth 300 billion, and 372 billion, 51% of UK exports. UK imports come from the EU. I often hear people, I have often heard people say, well, because we have 51% of imports coming from the EU, that's why they want to do a great deal. Well, I would hope they would want to do a great deal with us, but we should remember that a significant proportion of the imported goods from the EU are processed into finished products and actually represent some of the 43% of UK exports that we make back to the EU and to the rest of the world. So both are critical. We would, one would hope that in the event that we get an agreement, that means that we get continuity of that trade happening and those trade flows happening without tariffs. I want to make you aware of this gap that exists. The NEO are concerned about it, which is the risk of 220 million additional customs declarations that need to be made. There's a huge gap between what we do now and what we'll need to do from January if all of that trade continues to happen. And we would say the gap there is around 15 to 20,000 customs agents. Now, Chambers of Commerce have done their bit. We've hired, invested in 200 customs agents across the UK who stand ready to help chamber members to get their trades complete, and that's through the company that I lead called Chamber Customs. But there is a significant gap. So this is the point where I say, whether it's Chamber Customs or any other intermediary, you really ought to make sure that you have harnessed, if you like, the capacity you need to continue to make your trade happen. This is a checklist. I'm not going to go through every single point, but I describe it as slightly humorously, I think, but I have a strange sense of humor. Your 2020 mission is, in order that you're ready for the end of this current year, I'm suggesting that you ought to try and answer each of these 20 questions for your business. Some fairly basic. What is my Aori number? If you can answer that, you've got an Aori number. Do I need an XI Aori number for NI trade? So if you send goods to or receive goods from NI, or export from NI, or move goods from NI to GB or to the rest of the European Union, you will need an XI Aori number to distinguish in EU systems between your GB activity and your NI activity. Also, matters such as, do I benefit from free trade agreements where I sell my goods? That's if you do, you need to check that we are going to have a continuity agreement with that country in order that you can continue to benefit from trade agreements and the goods that you sell to that country. And if you don't have, if there's not going to be a trade agreement with the countries, for example, like Turkey or Mexico, then that will have an impact either in narrowing your margin on the goods that you sell, or increasing the cost of the goods that you buy. So if you're relying on FTAs to be competitive or on tariff rate quotas to be competitive, this is your time to go and look at your business and to do that risk assessment. And I'm suggesting if you can answer these 20 questions, you'll either get actions flowing out of that, or you can relax a little bit and think, well, what else applies to my business? What else should I do? Just sort of final few slides, just to talk about Chamber Customs and how we might be able to help with you. We offer advisory services to businesses, and we do very deep dives with with many companies actually so far in the last year, just to help them to understand what action they need to take and to point them in the direction of that action that is, mission critical for their business. And sometimes it's about the strategy they employ, the supply chains they operate, the way that they operate their business, and what changes they can make to provide that continuity. We do train people. We train our other intermediaries, staff, as well as our own in customs agency qualifications, as well as some businesses that simply want a quick deep dive one-day virtual training session on the things that they need to know. And finally, we can make customs declarations for you as well. What makes us unique, and what do we offer? Well, 200 customs agents across the UK that are highly trained. We created the training program for these people in the absence of one being available. Actually, it's now 46 locations, so we're near our members and in every nation. Our systems are trusted by Hmrc and approved by Hmrc, and we directly link into Hmrc's system, as we do into the inventory systems in every UK port. So we offer that adaptability. If your goods are moving into Dover, but you decide that actually you prefer them to come to Southampton, then we can handle those entries for you just in the same way as before. You don't need to find a broker near Southampton. We're going to deliver 500,000 more declaration capacity from January. Actually, 80% of that, more than 80%, has already been committed and signed up, but we do have some capacity left. And I know that Adrian Coburn's on the call today. He's one of your resident experts in Norfolk. And we're offering very clear pricing and line-by-line invoicing. And that might seem obvious, but it's not typical of the industry. And so we think it's important that you should know what we're charging you for and why the charges are there. But fundamentally, our service is compliance-led, which ought to offer you peace of mind should you use our services. If you want us to use our services, then Adrian would need you to send an email that contains the information we asked for here, ideally. Send it, oh, this says Kent, my apologies. A slide from another place this morning. So send it to Adrian at Norfolk Chamber of Commerce, and he'll be back in touch with you just to set up your account. I do too many presentations, folks. In there is a glossary of terms in case you find it useful. There's a lot of acronyms used in area of customs, so I stick that in there to the presentation, which will be sent out to you after this presentation. That concludes the slide deck that I wanted to present. So I'm going to shut that off, and I'm going to try to come to as many questions as I can.
Thank you. I've got a long list of questions, but I've just got a few things beforehand. So I've literally just popped in the chat the customs contact details. So you've got an email address and you've got AID's direct dial, so feel free to jot that down. I'll also be sharing a copy of Liam's slides following the this event. So you'll have a copy of all of those, and I'll include the contact details in there as well for you. And we've also got a couple of phone callers, which is absolutely fine. But can you just pop an email, do it to the Chamber Customs if you can see the chat, if not to our hello one, just so I know who you are, so I can send you, pull your email from the report and send you a copy of the slides, etc. That would be great. I've also popped in the chat function that we offer international trade training as well. So when Leon was saying about the, I always say these wrong, Incoterms, we can do training on that as well. Okay, so that's everything. There's a lot of questions, so bear with me while I try and get through as many as we can. So Liam, we purchase goods from a company in France who send direct to our customer in the UK. They invoice us, and then we invoice our customer. Where do we stand on customs, paperwork, etc. for this transition, please?
Well, that's a it's a good question. Also, it's a fairly common position for companies to be in, where they act as an agent almost for selling the goods. So they sell the goods, but actually the goods go directly from France to the customer. I guess it depends on the customer's willingness to be the importer of record. And so if the customer that you have in the UK is prepared to be the importer of record, then the customer could make the import. However, if the appearance from the customer's point of view is that you're supplying the goods from the UK to the customer, then they might reasonably expect that you become the importer of record, even if those goods don't land at your address or your warehouse, but come through the port and go directly to that customer. You would need to arrange to make the import declaration from France into the UK. And you would need to record that that was the case, that you had made that importation, and keep the appropriate records for Hmrc. And you would need a customs agent or broker to clear those goods at the border on your behalf. You could do it yourself, but you need to have a significant volume and the systems in place to do that. And it's not likely that you'll have the time to do that between now and the 1st of January. So it depends on your customer, it depends on your relationships, depends on the art of it's the art of the possible, isn't it? But you certainly, it feels like, without knowing more, that you would be the importer of record.
Thank you. So the next question. So I'm currently going through the questions in the Q&A. So if people want to follow them, great. There are some longer than others. So if you want to read them while I'm saying them, perfect. If not, I will pop some in the chat function as well, so you can follow them along. So Liam, do you know how many ECMT annual permits are available, and will monthly ones be available too?
I don't know the answer to that. It's an unknown unknown, and I'm sorry I can't give you the answer to that question. But is it ECMS?
It says ECMT, but I don't know if they've misspelt it. A number of permits on anything, I don't know. I'm not. I think this is transport permits. If the questioner can clarify. Yeah. So Lynn, if you can just clarify, we'll then come back to your question.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
Perfect. So then we've got this one. Are there any estimates of increased volume of ATA carnets that will be required?
There's the feeling from the ATA carnet network is that there may be some growth as people decide to use carnets for goods that are going to leave the country and come back in their existing state. It's important to stress, excuse me, that the use of a carnet is typically attached to often good, the broadcast industry use carnets to take film equipment abroad, but they bring it all back. Where you're going to take goods abroad, but you don't intend to bring all of those goods back, an ATA carnet is not. It's neither a a cost-effective or a very efficient way to do that. So whatever you take it with an ATA carnet has to return. The other option, of course, is transit. You could move goods under transit. If you're moving goods, let's say, to Switzerland from the UK, you could transit them to Switzerland, and whilst they drive, the route through all of the EU countries, they move under transit and are, go into and out of a country using a transit accompanying document would be the other option. But ATA carnets are for goods that are leaving the country and coming back in the original state. I know that actually related to that, Tom asked a question in that regard. Let me find it, Tom. It was about you're bringing in, I think, equipment, quite valuable equipment that then.
Is that the one that we regularly import subsystems?
That's it.
Yeah, okay, I can read that one. I've got a long list of Tom's questions.
Yeah.
So we regularly import subsystems and components. Values can be as high as 50k, but they are given to us free for tests for EU companies for developing possible future products. We have some here now. They arrived under free EU circulation. How do we handle sending them back?
Yeah, so I think you're describing, Tom, that these are pieces of equipment that are loaned to you, and you have actually looked at ATA carnet, but you say it's administratively and legally a nightmare and too expensive. So that would have been that could have been a way for you to bring those goods into the UK. To do the testing that you would do on them. Fundamentally, you're not changing the state of the goods. You're not changing the commodity code that the goods are in. I'm assuming that that's what you're doing. And the goods leave here in the same state as they arrived, pretty much, despite the fact that you've done some testing. So those goods have come under free circulation into the UK. And what you're saying is, how do I get them back afterwards? Well, a carnet wouldn't be any good to you because they're already here. For the goods that you've already got, you would need to export them from the UK to wherever they came from. If it's France, did you say France? You just said the EU, whichever country in the EU. And whilst the goods you didn't pay for the goods have an inherent customs valuation, and so it may be. But it may be that if you're not, I mean, again, this is getting into detailed kind of advice, but if you weren't intending doing any more testing on those goods, then I would suggest you get them back there under free circulation ASAP, because there will be costs attached to moving them after the 1st of January. So, it's because the goods are here, even if the goods are owned by someone else. There are mechanisms like inward processing relief and the like that could be available to you, but you need to have known that at the point the goods arrived in the UK.
Thank you. So Lynn's come back to us, read the previous question. So do you know how many, and she has put transport permits are available, and will monthly ones be available? So basically they want to know to allow them to send their trucks to the EU from January 2021.
Yeah, so that's why I have this glossary at the end of my presentation, because there are loads of acronyms and I've just been caught out by one. There's ECMS and ECMT, and I'm not a holier. But the thing about those permits is, I know that the Freight Haulage Association, British International Freight Association, and others have been lobbying government with regard to this, and they've been quoting numbers of the problem that will exist if there are too few permits available. I think they're being heard, but I haven't honestly heard of any number specifically being offered up by government or by the Department for Transport, and how many will be available and how frequently. So I can't be more helpful, but I think that's one of the unanswered questions that's outstanding.
Thank you. We'll go to Ross. So Ross has asked, some of export/imports to and from Europe are sent by carriers such as UPS, FedEx, Parcelforce, etc. Will they handle a lot of the paperwork for us?
They will handle the paperwork for you. of course, they will have to charge you because they're offering, that's a service that they're providing, and if there are costs that they incur, they need to pass on those costs and so on. But they're equipped to do that, and for goods of a value under £135, that's the de minimis level that's been set by our government and the border operating model. There would be no paperwork to do. So if the goods have a value below that threshold, nothing to do. If it's above that threshold, then fast parcel operators can use special procedures that are open to them to process the goods. But there will be costs attached, and they will expect you to remit the cost of any duty and VAT to them before they release the goods to you.
Thank you. And then he also asked, we already import from China and USA and export to various non-EU foreign countries, Chile, Australia, Middle East. The paperwork is all pretty straightforward. Why does it seem that with the EU, it's going to be incredibly complex and difficult?
Well, the answer to that is that it's going to be no more complex and no more difficult than moving goods to the countries that he just mentioned. It's not the complexity, it's the number of people that understand how to manage that complexity and the increase. So the rest of the world trade accounts for about 20 million export declarations a year and about 35 million import declarations a year, handled by countries that trade with the rest of the world and not EU. There's 180,000 companies in the UK who only trade with the European Union and who will need to make 220 million more declarations. So it's fair enough to say that a lot of those goods movements are not overly complex, but you need to know how to do them for them not to be complex. And it's the absence of customs agents, skill and expertise in our trading businesses that are a product of 30 years of being part of a single market.
Thank you. So this is a question from Matt. Do my freight forwarders require my signed permission to act on our behalf, or can they do that ad hoc when required?
They need your permission to act on your behalf, because they'll be acting in what's called a direct capacity. There are two kinds of customs capacity. One is direct and one is indirect. With indirect, the liability for the transaction, the duty, the VAT, can be apportioned to either party. In direct capacity, the liability for a wrong instruction or wrongly implemented sits purely with the trader, and the intermediary doesn't take any liability. That's the case for most intermediaries. They only operate in a direct capacity. You can have more than one. You can have approved more than one intermediary. That's true. You can do that. So if you sign an agreement with your intermediary, it would be a non-exclusive agreement. I don't think you would have an exclusive agreement. The exception to that would be if you were appointing someone to act as your global tax agent. And there are some intermediaries who will offer a service where they act as your global tax representative in an EU country. So they operate out of the UK, but they also operate in an EU country. And in that country, if they're going to do your import, they're going to export from the UK and import in the other country, then they would need to be appointed as your global tax representative in order to act on your behalf. I'm not certain where the liabilities lie in that arrangement. I'm not overly familiar with it, and I'm no tax expert. But certainly, in the context of what you're asking, one, you can appoint more than one customs agent. Secondly, you can have an arrangement with more than one that says they can act on your behalf. And thirdly, yes, you can make ad hoc arrangements. That's for someone doing an export entry, say. If they're doing import entries, though, it becomes more complex, because if you're appointing someone to act on your behalf for imports and you're giving them permission to appoint your duty deferment account, you can only do that with one actor. As far as I'm aware, someone can correct me here, but I think you can only appoint one representative to utilize your duty deferment account any one time. I'm actually going to take that away, and I'm going to challenge my colleagues to on that question as well, because I'm actually feeling a bit unsure.
I've made a note of it and I'll send it to you after this.
Yeah.
They've also, Matt also said, can we also be signed to more than one freight forwarder?
Yes, yeah, you can. You can absolutely. And in some respects, if it was me, I would make sure I had more than one option, given where we're heading. I would do that. I'd encourage people to do that. Daft, it sounds crazy that somebody that operates an intermediary is saying that to you, but I think a belt and braces approach in these circumstances is sensible.
Thank you. Just conscious about time, and we've still got so many more questions. So Tom says, how are Hmrc import VAT payments from EU countries going to be handled in 2021?
Okay, so when Hmrc will account for import duty, import VAT and import duty at the UK border, and Hmrc will keep all that money. Because it's our money, it's goods crossing our border coming into the UK, and any duties and VAT that are paid to the EU at their border, they'll keep that money, unless you have an establishment and where you can reclaim that and later repatriate it to the UK. But in essence, if you're asking Tom, do Hmrc who currently collect at the border and remit some of that money back to the EU, will they continue to do that? Then I don't know. They won't. We'll have sovereigns. We'll account. We'll hold all of that money because it's our money. It's for goods arriving into our customs area. Historically, I believe the process was we collected duty and VAT, and then when it came to accounting for the EU, UK's contribution to the EU, then all of those sums that we'd already collected were taken into account, and the balance remitted from the EU to the from the UK to the EU for all of the programs that we had drawn down. I think that's what happened. I hope that answers your question, Tom.
Thank you. He's also asked, will Hmrc still require payment in advance of clearance, even for the VAT registered consignees?
They will require prepayment unless you have a, well, in terms of duty, you can use postponed VAT accounting. So you wouldn't have to pay the VAT at the border if you're using postponed VAT accounting. You'll simply be providing your Aori number on that consignment in order that Hmrc can track who's subsequently going to be due for that VAT debt. On duty, as long as you have a duty deferment account, and I encourage you to apply for one if you don't have one, and the guarantee waiver, if you have that account in place, then again you would appoint your you would give authorization to your customs agent to utilize your account at the point of clearance, which means that you will then become those sums would become due on the 15th of the month following the month of import.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm conscious of time, so
Yes.
It's up to you, Liam. Do you want to carry on? Do you want me to email you the questions? How do you want to do this?
So I need to be somewhere else in 10 minutes' time. I'm happy to do another 5 minutes, but I also have to say to you that I cannot take your questions and provide you with answers subsequent to this. If I did that, I frankly would spend my day writing answers to questions. I'm sorry, I can't offer you that.
That's fine. Okay, I'll pick and choose. So, where can we get information about which ports are in better or worse shape for importing/exporting, and how can we control what ports are used?
Well, I don't know any ports that are going to admit to not being ready, because they're all commercial enterprises. But the Association of British Ports would say they're as ready as they can be. If it depends. There are inventory linked ports, non-inventory linked ports. Some have more infrastructure than others. I can't really make a call. I think it's dependent on where you're placed as a business, where you are sending goods to, and what those trade links are like for each port. But certainly, it's worth reviewing what you do and where you do it, and the routes to the market that you need to have, either out to another market or in from another market, and think about those. I mean, certainly the ro-ro ports in the UK are the most frequently used and where most tonnage comes through from the European Union. That's unlikely to change. In the case of those ports, those are the ports that strategically the government has to make sure are best placed to not end up with some kind of gridlock. So I'm sure they're doing everything in their power to make sure that or try to ensure that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will transport companies like FedEx still be able to charge exorbitant payment processing fees for processing import VAT payments?
They're a private company. They can effectively set their charges in the market, decides whether they use them. I don't know whether FedEx is exorbitant in their fees. I wouldn't like to comment on that. Genuinely, I don't know. But I think the volumes that, I make the following point, that the volumes that are expected to the increase in volumes that we're expected to see, simple economics will tell you that demand and supply will push prices up. The only commitment I can make in terms of Chamber Customs is that we have fixed our price and we don't intend to move it. Certainly not in the next 6 months or so. But prices I expect are going to move if people are struggling to get the work done. And the other reason why that would happen is because we've seen quite a bit of movement in people being moving between companies, and for higher salaries. So the cost of getting the work done is increasing.
Thank you. And then they've also said, same question for the shipping companies, big processing fees for handling any other new paperwork.
I mean, I don't know, again, I don't know whether their prices are, I understand it's quite a competitive market, or certainly has been for shippers. Clearly there will be some routes where some of the major companies have a dominance on a trade route, and I guess they'll behave as businesses do. They'll try to be competitive. I don't know that we'll see price inflation on those trade routes particularly. We ought not to. Bear in mind the challenge. This isn't a global problem. COVID's a global problem. Brexit is a local problem, and in time these routes through the channel ports and routes through the other ports and the paperwork that needs to be done, businesses will become tuned into getting this work done and making this happen. I'll just mention one final thing before I go, which is the National Audit Office also estimated the cost to business of this additional paperwork about 18 months ago, more than that, and it's £7 billion per annum was their estimate at that time, just the additional cost to business. Now, anyone that's in here that runs a business will know that the cost of that eventually falls somewhere, and typically it lands at us as consumers. Whatever we're producing, wherever it's going, the costs get added, and ultimately as consumers, that's when we pay the price. We pay it as consumers of goods, and we pay it as consumers of services, and that includes services from government. Tom is saying that government should regulate the processing fees. I think, Tom, whilst that might feel like a good thing to do, I think it's almost never going to happen. Sorry to be so doom and gloom in that. The VAT payments, the payment processing, incidentally, that shippers charge is because in order to process the VAT on your behalf, they need to guarantee the payment of that debt to the government. And to do that, they need to have a system set up with the government and cash that sits behind that to be able to make that happen. So that's why they pass on fees. For our part in Chamber Customs, our fee for remitting VAT or duty is 3% of the value. So whatever the value is, if it's £100, then we'll charge you £3. If it's £1,000, we'll charge you £30. My God, Tom get charged £400 for them processing a credit card payment. That's extraordinary. That certainly seems extraordinary. I think I'd find a new shipper, Tom. Definitely find a new shipper. That's crazy. We'll never charge you £400, Tom. Not unless you're processing £40,000 of duty, and we'll happily take a credit card payment. So that's all I can say about that. Sorry, I can't answer more. Thanks for inviting me on today. Apologies for having Kent and Victor Chamber on that slide, but in my defence, I finished that presentation at 12 o'clock today and came on yours at 2, and I did have lunch, damn. But thanks, Kayleen, and thanks, Ed, for everything you're doing up there. I'm sure we can support your members as we move forward, and I need to sign off out and go somewhere else now.
Yes, you go and I'll finish up here. Can you just share a copy of the presentation with me once you've done on your next one, but I'll drop you a reminder email.
You won't have to, it'll be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye. So yeah, apologies for slightly overrunning, but I appreciate that obviously you've got a lot of questions and I'd rather we answer those and then finish on time. So yeah, thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Apologies that we couldn't answer everyone's questions, but hopefully we got through the majority of them. So as promised, as soon as I get a copy of the presentation, I'll share this with you along with our customs contact details, our international trade training link, and anything else that I think is of relevance. So once this recording is available as well, I'll share with you next week. So yeah, thank you again for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed this session, and hopefully we'll see you on one of our virtual events coming soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, week, yeah, and see you later. Bye.